Hi guys, welcome to the Break the Chain podcast. I'm here today with Trevor Tacey. Trevor was born in Newark. He's an EFT therapist. He specialises in trauma treatment and he's the author of Chasing Dragons and Butterflies. Thank you for coming on the show today, Trevor.
Very welcome, James.
This is a really cool podcast because you're the first person that I've kind of interviewed that's been local to where the majority of my audience is, because a lot of people that we know are kind of in Lincoln, Horncastle, or mostly around Lincolnshire. I used to spend a bit of time in Newark myself when I was there. So you've actually got 22 years in recovery. Is that right?
23, yeah.
23 now. Cool. That's awesome. So you have got an amazing story. Would you mind sharing that with us, please?
No problem at all, James. Yeah, as you've already said, I started my life in Newark, where I was born, I guess the beginning of my childhood was quite fractious, and I seemed to be always getting into trouble. I was always in the wrong place, or doing the wrong thing, and getting into problems at home. But they started to escalate as I got older, so the beginning of it really was there was three brothers. I had two younger brothers. I was the oldest by 2 years. Graham was 2 years younger than me, and then Alan 5 years younger than me. We were all brought up as Catholics, and a Catholic education, and that was quite traumatic in itself. I mean, the nuns that we had as teachers, they were quite brutal, to say the least, in the way they treated us if we misbehaved, and but I started off. Believe it or not, I started off as an altar boy, and learning how to do the Latin responses, within the church service, and so went through all the First Communion stuff and all that. So seemed to start off pretty well, but then things sort of had a downward spiral. I started getting. I was working on the markets. I was stealing money. I was stealing money off my mum, to buy. But I was in charge of looking after my mum. I was in brothers because I was the oldest. I was the one that was in charge of them, to look after them and make sure I kept them safe. And I did that. We were at the same school together, so it's quite easily for me to do that. But when I was, we were living in a place we lived in a pub for a while, and then we left there, and I never knew whether it was because of I was stealing money from under the counter or whatever, And I was only about 10 years old at that time, and when we moved out into the country, and I loved it out there, I loved being in the country, fishing and country sports, and that was ferrets and. Running dogs, and it was right up my street. I loved it, and during the summer holidays, we would go fishing all the time. And on this particular time, we were going. We'd been the day before, and my brother Graham couldn't find his fishing reel, and so we went without him, we went to, and when I got down to the fishing, I had Alan with me and one of our friends, and when I got down to the river, I found his fishing reel in my basket. Then I had the dilemma of, do I go back, don't I go back? And it was a long trek, it was about 3 miles away. I decided to stay there, and unfortunately, when we got back, we found out he'd been killed in a road accident, doing an errand for my mum, So I always had that. That was the first instant of a trauma in my life, I think. I'd had a few with my dad. My dad was quite violent, but he hadn't got really violent at that time. As I got older, he got sort of more violent towards me. but anyway, I totally blame myself. You know, I was the one that's supposed to be looking after him. If only, you know what I mean? If I'd have took the reel back, he'd have been still alive. And so I had all that sort of thing going on. Anyway, shortly after that, I was in the wrong place again. We used to go into these things called malt kilns. I don't know where they used to store grain and that in them, and we used to make like dens among the sacks of grain as kids from school. And I got sexually molested by a guy in there who sort of groomed me, you know, making me, you know, getting me to look at girly magazines and stuff like that, and then eventually sexually molested me. And that was only shortly after my brother had been killed. And then, you know, so I was 12 years old at that time, and it wasn't much later, you know, I got a job. I left school, and I found a job myself, became a welder. My dad worked on power stations, so it's something I wanted to do. But it was the 60s, you know, and I started using drugs fairly quickly, you know what I mean, within, you know, shortly after leaving school at 15. And that started off as a bit of fun with my friends and you know, going to all-nighters and clubs, and you know, the Mods and Rocker thing was on at the time, you know what I mean, so we're going down the beach and playing with the Hells Angels and all that sort of thing going off, which was not normal at that time in that era, you know. The not so normal thing was a lot of my friends grew out of it and continued to get on with the rest of their lives and marriages and settled down. And I didn't. I did get married when I was 18 because I got my girlfriend pregnant. My mum, I went back home, and my mum was in no uncertain circumstances said that, you know, well, we need to get married, with her being Catholic and that. So we did, but that didn't last very long. I'd started at that time, you know, I mean, by the time I was 18, I'd started using opiates. I'd been mostly using amphetamines up until that point. And at 21, I went into my first rehab. I started getting in trouble with the police. I was breaking into chemists on a regular basis. And as I said, a lot of my friends had already settled down, and but I couldn't. You know, I mean, I didn't understand that. You know, why they'd want to. You know, I just wanted to carry on using drugs, and this breaking into chemists was, you know, I mean, became like an occupation to me, really. Just after I got married, my dad actually took me on a power station to work with him. You know, a place in Warrington in Cheshire, a place called Fiddler's Ferry, and I really enjoyed it. You know, I mean, it was the first time I'd been out of. I'd lost my job as the apprentice welder. You know, due to you know, my lifestyle. You know, I mean, missing and coming down off my drugs and missing days at work. Eventually, they got rid of me. So. Then I started getting into trouble when I was like into trouble with the police when I was about 21, and my breaking into chemists had become so prolific that I ended up in a treatment centre because I went to court and I was charged with breaking into 14 chemists 13 days after getting a suspended sentence for the same thing at Nottingham Crown Court. And the judge was like, you know what I mean, he sort of had to look twice at what he was looking at, you know what I mean, to see, you know what I mean, just exactly, he checked whether these figures were that were correct, like, you know, anyway, he sent me to as what they call a condition of residence. I don't know whether they do it anymore. But it was like a probation order where I had to go to a treatment centre and spend some time. They couldn't keep me for more than a year, but at that particular time, you know, my marriage was breaking down. My wife had been unfaithful to me with a friend of mine while I was on remand, and so that marriage had virtually come to an end at that point. you know, I was just this angry. I had this like massive chip on my shoulder and blaming everybody for the way my life was. And but I decided that, you know, I was just going to carry on doing what I was doing. I had no intentions of stopping drugs, and I just used this treatment centre as you know, a way of avoiding going to prison, really. I can remember the psychiatrist in there, the Dr. Williams, saying to me, because I never admitted that I was like these other people. You know, there were people in there. I hadn't started at 21. I don't think I had started using opiates because I remember now that at that point in there I'd been mostly using amphetamines, and a lot of people were injecting addicts in there or alcoholics, and I never related to them. I said, you know, I was different to them. I always thought I was different to them, like, you know, smartly, you know what I mean? I was using amphetamines, I was going out clubbing most nights, and, you know what I mean, at that point. And so, you know what I mean, I didn't relate to those people. But this Dr. Williams says to me, whatever you think, you know what I mean, you're exactly like them. And he says, and one day you're going to return, you know what I mean, and you will be either an alcoholic or a using addict. And I just laughed at him, you know what I mean, and I left that facility, and it was only a short time later before I was injecting morphine. That was the first thing I injected, and then went on to heroin. But so chemist breaking went on. It was shortly after I came out of that treatment, and the marriage completely broke down. I got caught again, and ended up with a 2-year prison sentence. I ended up with 14 convictions, all drug-related, 4 prison terms, 3 suspended sentences, and that condition of residence in 1972. So my life was just on a down spiral. You know, I came out of prison after that first. That first prison sentence, that first 2-year prison sentence, you know, lost all my remission. I was on riots and all sorts, and, you know, I mean, just completely not interested in. I knew exactly what I was doing when I got out at that point. And then I went, and then when I got out, you know, I mean, I was getting into trouble again, and my mum. You know, my mum and dad. I went back to my mum and dad's, and in Newark. And they couldn't do it. It was making them ill, me just being around them, like, you know. And gave me some money. Saw one of my dad in the industry, and promptly put me on a train to Paul's friends, who was involved in the construction in Dorset, to a power station job that I found, that she'd found me out there, like, you know, in as far away from Newark as she could get me, I think. And I stayed down there for quite a few years, you know, drinking. I'm still drinking and mostly using cannabis, though, and not a lot of other drugs, although I did. I was doing acid and stuff like that, LSD. But that I kept out of trouble for while I was down in that area. But saying that, you know, there came a point where while I was using LSD, when just everything came up on top, all my memories and the feelings I had about myself became so intense that I tried to commit suicide. And I ended up putting the back of a bus building to start with. I wanted reason, you know what I mean? I wanted if I was going to die, you know what I mean? I wanted it to be a spectacular death for some reason, because what I didn't want is like some little, you know what I mean, a little square in the back of the local paper saying, you know what I mean, another addict, or, you know, he died from an overdose or whatever. And it's this crazy idea that I nearly fulfilled, but ended up with my head under the back of a bus anyway. And the bus stopped and took a little bit of the scalp off my head, but somehow this guy had seen me, jumped out of his car and dragged me out and saved my life. But yeah, and I wasn't very kind to him, you know, and I sort of berated him for stopping me doing what I wanted to do, and things. Anyway, I ended up to Newark, spiraled out of control. I was on methadone scripts for about 20 odd years, in and out of prison, like I say. Prison became like an occupational hazard, really. It was just trying to keep one to the police all the time, and this is how this is how I live my life. But eventually, I married again in '84, and we're still married. I don't know. I mean, that's a miracle in itself. I don't know what woman for those first years while I was using, but she did. My wife's name's Cindy, and she stuck by through times, and I asked, why, and she said that was, why did she just leave me? Said, because I knew that wasn't who you really were, I'd seen another side of you, and I was convinced that side of you would eventually succeed and get through that. And she saw something that I definitely didn't see in her. And but she did, she stuck by me, and eventually, but she got to a point where I'd started using crack cocaine, and I was working on the power stations, so I was using methadone to keep out of prison. I couldn't do any more prison at that time. I was about, I don't know, 40s, reaching my 40s anyway, and I was just, I was just self-medicating, but I ain't been enjoying drugs for years, I was like, just want to, I couldn't bear the thought of stopping. I've tried a few times to stop, but I never actually achieved it. The only time I stopped using is when they locked me up, and I'd stop then. And there were times when, I was convinced that this time was going to be different when I got out of prison, and I'd write home saying, I'm not doing this again. I really had enough. And then I'd find myself back using again, and I couldn't understand why. I never understood what addiction was. And but anyway, one day she got to the point where she was so worried about me that she'd gone to see my brother, my surviving brother Alan, who I for a few years, but he'd stopped some time ago, and she didn't know where else to go, and she said to him, she says, I'm waiting, I'm dreading, in the house, he says, dreading a knock on the door saying he's either OD'd or he's smashed his car up coming back from his dealer's, because I had to drive about, 15 miles to get to my dealer's house. So I'd be, driving under the influence. And she said that she just was waiting for that door, because it got to the point where I was going to work. I was going to work on my methadone, and then I was going and using heroin and crack cocaine, and then I was travelling back home at like 2 o'clock in the morning, sleeping on the settee in the same clothes I'd had on the day before, getting back in my car and driving off to work, doing another 10-hour shift, and then doing the same thing. And it was, I was just like, I again over and over again. I don't know how I kept going, actually, really. And I was just surviving, I was eating like muller rices, like little tubs of rice. It's all I could, it's the only thing I could eat. Anyway, she went to see my brother and asked him if he could help, and long and short of it was that he knew somebody had been through a 12-step program, a treatment centre, and asked me if I'd be interested in going, and I was, at that point. And then, so he started to make arrangements for me to go into this treatment centre. I didn't know what the 12 steps were. I'd never heard of the 12-step program. But I did, I went along with it, and something happened, like synchronicities, or you think there's synchronicities at the time. I think I had some divine intervention in my recovery, because he'd made some arrangements, and I'd been and had an interview with them, and they'd put me on a waiting list, and I was waiting, and there was like a free waiting list, and in between times I started back to work, and my work was like a seasonal. It was a summer job, and I'd finish about September time, and I'd have about 5 months off, but I earned money in that time to to survive the 5 months off. And so just starting a job was an important thing. I was one of the first ones on the job, and then I had a phone call, and this lady rang me up and said, "I've got some," and was Benter, I always remember her. She says, "I've got some good news and some bad news for you." I says, "What's the good news?" She said, before this, I was thinking to myself, you know what I mean, I can't, I'm going to have to put this treatment centre off, you know what I mean, I'll ask him if I can do it in September when I finish work, it'll be a lot better. Happened, I was doing a run for the dealer to fetch some crack, and my car broke down, and when I went to push her, you know what I mean, all that sort of rubbish. And, but just before that, my car off the road, I slipped. I was pushing it with my back, and I slipped. And something went in my leg, and I don't know what it was. I was in absolute agony. And I did the trip, bandaged it up with some crepe bandage or something, and then found out the next day when the drugs worked, had run out, and realised I had a ruptured Achilles tendon. And so I had to have a full plaster on. And so I couldn't go to work, and I had a sick note. And then I got this phone call. Bad news is you've got to come in tomorrow. And it was like from Benter, and she says, the good news and the bad news. The good news is I've got a bed for you. That ain't bad news. I was actually, you know what I mean, when she said those words to me, you know what I mean, even though I didn't know where I was going, you know what I mean, I was so elated, you know what I mean, and so relieved. And it was like, you know what I mean, I was just in floods of tears. I was sat there on my own in floods of tears, you know what I mean, of the thought of, you know what I mean, maybe this is going to end. And so I went into this treatment centre with this full plaster on, and a sick note for 6 weeks, which was the amount of time I was going to be in there. And then got introduced to the 12-step program and worked through that. And to be honest, you know what I mean, that was. I learnt so much in there, but there was sort of I was there for, you know what I mean, like 10 years. I was doing service within you know, learning how to think about other people rather than myself all the time. A lot of the spiritual stuff was starting to rub off on me, and I was, you know what I mean, I learned it was where I needed to be at that particular time. But as time went on, you know what I mean, I'd worked through the steps and 4s and 5s, and I started to realise, you know, the impact that childhood traumas have had on me, and I mean like the you know, the beatings from my dad and so forth, you know what I mean, that were quite bad, and the things that happened to me, the molestings had and how my behaviours. I'd stopped using. My behaviours were still the same. You know, I mean, I was still angry. I was still falling out with people. I was still nearly getting into fights, and I did get into a fight on the front street. I had the whole street out one day. You know, with something that I couldn't deal with, when I just snapped for no reason. I didn't like myself. You know what I mean? I really didn't like who I was. I'd stopped using. I was supposed to be working this spiritual program. And there I was rolling about, a 47-year-old rolling about with a name thing outside, you know, and both of us ending up in hospital. It was like, this don't add up, you know what I mean? Something's drastically wrong. And then that's where my search started, you know. I started looking for something that, you know, that could help me with this part of my life, you know what I mean? I'd stopped using drugs, but, you know what I mean, I wasn't happy. I still had those, you know, that restless, irritable and discontented. That was me. That was me wrapped up in a ball, you know, and with sort of fleeting moments of feeling all right and calm. But anyway, what happened was I went to a mind, body, and I used to go to his mind, body, and spirit. Well, I don't really look. Well, that's part of it. That was part of the journey. Those books at the back of it, you know, and it's like a library of books, you know, of self-help books. Most of them are, anyway. And but that didn't do the trick, you know. And then I went to these mind, body, and spirits. I was finding out about Reiki and energy healing and one thing and another. And I came across this lady who was doing a 40 EFT, Never heard of it. Emotional freedom technique. It's just like tapping on certain points on the face and body, and it's supposed to relieve anxiety and stress, depression, and she could deal with trauma as well. And she had a list of things at the back of her that it could help with. So, I went over and spoke to her and told her what I thought my problem was, and she said, "Well, come along and try it out." So I did. And from that moment on, when I went to do that first, I knew straight away, as soon as I went into that first session, that this is what I've been looking for. Because within a short period of time, this is what worked for me. It was like people try different things. This is what worked for me. And I went along for about, about 10 weeks or something like that. I was going to see her. And she'd do these tapping on me and work through these traumas, and I'd feel these feelings sort of melting away. These things that I'd held on to all these years were like melting away in a matter of minutes, or perhaps 2 sessions or something like that. And I was starting to understand about my belief system, and I was starting to understand about the imprints that I got along with me, the learned behaviours from my father, and I never hit my children, but I was still an angry person that could frighten them, with raising my voice and not realising, and I had so much to learn, that I hadn't learned up until then. Learning how to have a relationship with my wife, it was like starting all over from well, I don't think I ever did really have a proper relationship with her, as a using addict. It's not possible, my emotions were all cut off. And so, and that was it for me, It was like my life started to turn around. And she said to me, while I was early on in the treatment, that, you'll notice that your relationships will change as a result of this. And they did, It was just I became so much calmer and things so more resilient. Things would just go past me that normally would have drove me to distraction. And, I just felt, that thing that they talk about being comfortable in your own skin, I never felt it until after till I'd worked through this. And that's when my life really started to pick up. I knew this was really important. I started working with the EFT. So I got trained up, I started my own business. I started working with other addicts. That weren't hard to come by, since I was a member of the Narcotics Anonymous. I had plenty of volunteers that wanted to come and try it out, and I started working from there. I wanted to help other people because I realised that how powerful these techniques were, and and so that's all my I learned. The other thing that I learned during that time when I was finding out about trauma was a thing called the ACE study. It's called the Adverse Childhood Experience Study, and it was something that was in America. Same year that I got clean, 1997, and 17,000 people took part in it, and they were looking at how ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experience traumas, and they'd list them in different categories. They'd have like emotional abuse, physical and sexual abuse, and neglect. And they give you like 10 questions, and you work through these questions. And if you had like more than 6 or 7, you were about, you were about 20, 30 times more likely to be a using addict than somebody who didn't have any. And there's a lot of work being done around it now. But I found it, I found it after I found EFT. But it was like having a puzzle. With half the pieces at the side, you haven't quite got the full picture, and then putting these pieces into place, and it made the full picture for me. It just made so much sense, and so I started using those questionnaires, that questionnaire, with other addicts. And nearly all of them was scoring 8s, 9s out of 10. It's not a comprehensive questionnaire. It's quite, using just 10 questions, you could make it 20. But they just use these 10 questions, and most addicts will score really high on it. So I started to look at, as addiction as not so much as a disease. As you know, for me, I've been, you know, and it worked for me when I was at Alcoholics Anonymous. But I got to a point where I started to see it as the addiction being a symptom of a deeper problem, and that deeper problem was unresolved trauma. And I really believe that, and work on those lines. Yeah, so that was it basically for me. I mean, I carried on working with addicts, and then I started to sort of attract other people. People were contacting me and saying, "Look, I've got those same feelings. I'm not an addict, but I've still got the anxiety, the anger, you know, the behaviour problems." And they'd come and see me, and I'd work with them, and you'd find that they all had very similar childhood things that hadn't been addressed. And once they were addressed, you know, their life started to improve. And so, yeah, I think that's it for me, James.
That's amazing. It's such an incredible story. You know, I already listened through to it once. I'm a bit worried there's a bit of a delay between my microphone and when you're hearing it, but hopefully it all goes through okay. I mean, how long was you in active addiction for? You must have been thinking it was impossible to get better by, you know, it must have been so long.
Yeah, it was the best part of 30 years. You know what I mean? I was in active addiction, yeah. I mean, starting off from, you know, using amphetamines when I didn't really think I was an addict at that point, and was still going to work, you know what I mean? But it wasn't long before it was out of control, you know what I mean? By the time I was 90, 3 or 4 years later, it was definitely out of control.
That's unbelievable. It's amazing that you can, you know, make a recovery after all that time. Because I was in active addiction for around a decade, and I, you know, after 10 years, I couldn't remember what it was like before that. I had no idea what it felt like to be sober. Every day had become, you know, my whole, like, I didn't know anything beyond that. So to be able to do 3 decades, 30 years of that, and then come back from that, and to be, you know, you look like you're in a relatively good headspace now.
Yeah, I am definitely in a better headspace. Well, I wouldn't have had to improve very much to be in a better headspace than what's that particular time. But I the other part of it is that it's losing your identity, isn't it? I mean, I think when I came out of addiction, you know, I mean, after all those years, I didn't know who I was. You know, I mean, it was trying to find out who I really was, because. You know, I mean, I was known. You know, everybody that knew me as a using addict. They didn't know me as any. Well, they knew me at work for the work that I did. You know, but most people knew me as a using addict. I identified myself as an addict. You know, and a drug user, and I didn't know anything else. There's another part about it is, you know, I mean, I said about the disease concept. I don't want to give the impression that I'm one of these controlled drinkers, because I don't do that. But the thing is that I practice total abstinence. You know what I mean? 23 years of total abstinence, and people say, well, if you don't believe in the disease concept, why are you practicing control? Why are you practicing complete abstinence? And I had to think about that myself, you know what I mean, why I did. I mean, I chose to, but do you know what the real reason was? I think was the fact that all those years, you know what I mean, I've been suppressing my emotions, you know what I mean. I'd never been fully present emotionally for my children, and 2 lots of children, you know what I mean. I had 2 children that went into care from the first marriage when it broke down. And then the children that I have today, you know what I mean, I want to be emotionally available to them. And I started to realise that, you know, not my feelings are the most valuable thing I have today. You know what I mean, I don't care whether they're good, bad or indifferent. You know what I mean, I cherish every one of them, and I wouldn't give that up for anything. You know, not for a quick drink down the pub with my son or whatever, you know what I mean, or some celebration or whatever. It's not in the equation, because I am, you know what I mean, I wasted, as far as I'm concerned, I wasted all those emotions that I could have shared with another human being, because I locked down. You know what I mean? I'm emotionally incapable of having a proper relationship in any shape or form. And this is like proper now. You know what I mean? It's like I enjoy, you know what I mean, building my relationship with my life and the things that we needed to learn together. And, you know, 37 years together, and we love. She's on lockdown now at the moment, working from home, so she loves being at home. You know what I mean? And I just, you know what I mean, I just feel so fortunate. I wouldn't swap that for anything. There's nothing that would could entice me to give any of that up.
It's amazing what you said about, you know, you didn't know who you was. And I think most people don't really think about that question. You know, who are you? We like to, you know, when someone asks us who we are, we reel off a load of labels, don't we? Oh, my name's James. I like techno. I go to. Yeah. I'm a raver. I am. You know, all these labels he had, and all these labels I had. Like, oh, I like punk music. I like this, and you know, and you think that's who you are. You get so engrossed in that identity that. And I think one of the things is like these things, you know, I had all my worth wrapped up in this thing, in this false ego that I'd created to kind of give me, you know, some kind of worth with this identity. I was so scared. I was terrified to let go of that because I felt worthless underneath that. And what's amazed me through sobriety and complete abstinence from, you know, drugs and alcohol is that, and I didn't even do this through a 12-step program. I found this through a yoga process, which basically told me, and one of the reasons why I realized I had to stop all of them is that drugs and alcohol give power to the mind over you. When you do these things, that you are allowing your mind to control you, and you're giving away your freedom. And that to me was just like, shit.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, shit. I was like, I don't like that. But, you know, I'd been so scared to find out what was underneath this. And I was so scared that I was worthless, and I was so insecure that I was so terrified to do this. But, you know, having gone, you know, you've got to go deep down that hole, and it is an uncomfortable hole to go down, isn't it? But I was just absolutely amazed to realize that actually, when I started peeling back layers, that what was underneath, I actually quite liked it. And other people seem to as well, you know. People had always told me I like you better sober, and I just didn't get it. I just didn't get it. I just like, bollocks. Yeah. Well, I don't like me sober, you know, and I feel like shit when I'm sober, and I feel even if you like me better, I'm so anxious and just feel like shit around you that I can't even do it. You know what I mean? Even if, you know, and I just couldn't believe it. You know, I couldn't buy it.
Yeah, it's I do, yeah. I mean, finding out my authentic self, like you said, you know what I mean? I didn't have a clue who I was, you know what I mean? Like you said, I had all those labels, you know what I mean, that I put on myself and other people put on me, you know what I mean? But it would be around my career as well, you know what I mean? I'm a welder or a fabricator or whatever, you know, and it was, no, you know, I'm much more than that, you know, but it is scary, you know? But what I liked about it was, like you were saying about peeling the layers of the onion back. You know, once I got past that fear of delving deeper, it turned into an adventure. You know what I mean? When I turn up something new, you know what I mean, that I hadn't recognised before that could make a difference in my life, it was like, wow. You know what I mean? I know, you know what I mean? I can work with this. You know, and I know what I need to do, and I never noticed that before. You know, or something about myself that I never noticed before. You know, and it was like, you know what I mean? I'd lived a life of being a chameleon. You know what I mean? Not a comedian. You know what I mean? I could fit into any sort of situation. You know what I mean? If you wanted me to smile, or you wanted me angry, you wanted me this, that, the other. You know what I mean? I could fit into any of those roles, but I didn't know how to be myself. You know what I mean? Like you're saying, it was a scary thing being myself. You know what I mean? If I'm not this, then who am I? If I'm not this addict, you know, if I'm not who I perceive myself to be, then who am I? And that thought, that not knowing, was the scary part.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? On whether I could pull it off.
Yeah.
I didn't even know whether I could still do my job when I wasn't using drugs. You know what I mean? It was things like that. You know, it scared me.
I found that hard, having the lack of motivation coming out the other side of addiction is just horrendous. And, it's just you're just flat, aren't you?
Yeah.
You've got nothing. It's like you're a car and you ain't got any petrol anymore. And you've got to you got to get out and push the fucking thing. And that first part of coming out of addiction, never expect that to easy. You got to fight your way through that bit. You really have to, don't you? And it kind of just is one of them things where, and I think because the 12 steps and the reality of getting over an addiction always has that spiritual element to it, is that the nature of spiritual things is it starts out being not that great, and the more you do it, the better it gets. Whereas, the drugs and everything start out great, and the more you do them, the worse they get. It's kind of the opposite of that. And it's, it ain't a cheap thing, is it?
Absolutely,
yeah. It seemed like the anger was one of the real driving forces for your addiction. Did that, did that start with your brother, and did losing your brother, I imagine that, everyone blames themselves, don't they? Everyone's kind of in that same headspace where they all think that they could have done something about it, and then you're kind of all in the same boat, and you're all taking it out on each other.
I think I think it's a mixture of a lot of things. One of the things was around my brother, losing my brother, and if things had been different, if I'd have done things differently, the outcome have been different. Was it my feeling like it's my responsibility? I also had an element of responsibility, even as a as a young kid. Being in charge of my two brothers. And not being able to keep one of them safe, and then lose, and him losing his life. But the other part of it, was the thing around, the guy that sexually abused me. It was like the anger around him, and the anger around myself, for allowing that to, feeling responsible for that as well, as if it was my fault. I'd allowed this guy to, I felt that I allowed this guy to abuse me, so I was angry with him for what he'd done to me. But also I had the guilt and shame around the fact that I was in there. I could have put a stop to it. Why didn't I? I might have only been 12 years old, but I never contemplated that as old, as I got older. I still had that feeling of there was something wrong with me, I also had that feeling of something wrong with me. I had that feeling of something my dad kicked off, I had that feeling of something wrong with me when I allowed this to happen. Whenever I got into trouble, when I was stealing things, I always felt there was, my dad always said, you're not wired up properly, and, and I felt he was right at some point, that I wasn't wired up properly. There was something in me, that caused me to almost seek out ways of getting into trouble. It was like it was like an adrenaline junkie, but in the wrong, in all the wrong areas. Where I was getting into lots of trouble for it, I had physical trouble and then eventually with the police and so forth. But the anger was a big thing with me, and it was like things that feeling humiliated in certain things. I was always lashing out. I was always in fights. Whether it was drunken fights or at work or school, in clubs, it didn't matter, where it was. I was always sort of lashing out. I had no control over that. It was like a pressure cooker, like things were building up, and somebody was going to get it sooner or later. And it was, and I didn't like it because I made a fool of a lot of the times. I made a fool of myself, blowing up. The smallest thing. It was like, I'd think about it afterwards and think, Christ, what? It's no big deal. Why did you go off? And And at such an extent, it was sort of over the top to the actual incident. The way I reacted to it. I never really understood that. But I know that all I know is, is when the traumas, that part of my life that I dealt with the EFT, when that went, that rage went as well. You know what I mean? Because it was a rage that was inside me. You know, and who knows? You know where it originated from. I know some of the things, but there was most probably an accumulation of lots of little things that made me like this human pressure cooker waiting to go off. You know, and sometimes it was people who, you know, sometimes it was innocent bystanders. You know what I mean? Or, so to speak. You know what I mean? It was like people who it didn't really, who hadn't really caused it. You know what I mean? But it built up, and then this person said something, and you know what I mean, the lid was blown off. And I definitely, you know, when I got into recovery, I hated that side of me. You know what I mean? And yet I had no control over it. I didn't feel as if I did anyway. Mm. No. Yeah. It was like, it was completely alien to me, you know what I mean? And you know, I mean, some of the things they were talking about, you know what I mean, about the spiritual side, especially the spiritual side of it, because I never felt I had a spiritual, there was any spirituality attached to my identity. And I felt, you know what I mean, as if I was in, you know what I mean, I was an imposter almost, you know what I mean, sat in there trying to, you know, trying to just go along with it. And but you know, eventually, you know what I mean, I started to understand what they were trying to say. You know what I mean, I think one of the things that stuck in my mind around that was they talked about the disease concept, but one thing I did relate to was the fact that when I put one mood altering chemical into any mood altering chemical into my body, something happens, and it's like, and I have no control. It's going to end, and that sort of clicked with me, you know. And it was like, yeah, I know now, you know what I mean, why when I was in prison. And I was writing them letters to my wife, and I was completely honest with her, you know, saying that on the note, you know what I mean, I'm definitely not going to use again, you know what I mean, this isn't going to happen. And then I'd be released from prison, and I wouldn't have somebody picking me up at the gate with a handful of drugs, you know what I mean. I'd make my own way home, and then I'd innocently go to the pub and have a few drinks with my friends, because I never knew about, you know what I mean, that could kick anything off. And before I knew it, I was back using again. And it was like, shit, how did that happen? You know what I mean? I was so sure that you know what I mean, this could never happen again. I never understood, you know what I mean, when I start drinking, the inhibitions go, and then it's not enough, and I want to try, and I'll have a bit of a joint, a couple, and then somebody will offer me something else, and it'll be, yeah, okay, well, just this once. You know what I mean? I'll just use at weekends. With my, you know what I mean? I don't know how many times I've said that to myself. You know what I mean? It's like, it's never happened. Yeah. Never happened. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No. I heard something the other day. I don't know. It might have been on one of these on one of the groups, like recovery groups. And this lady on there said her husband. She was married to an addict, and she saw and her husband told her. He says, "Look," he says, "I'm married to my drugs, and you're my mistress." And it's like, yeah, I can relate to that. You know what I mean? When that little bag of, that little bag of powder, or whatever it might be, or a few pills, is more important than your relationship and your family. It's not, you know what I mean? But it becomes more important because you can't, you know what I mean? If you've got to choose between the two, you know which one you're going to take. And it was like that, you know what I mean? That's so bad, you know what I mean? It was like, how could I do that? You know what I mean? And yet I did, over and over again, chose that against my family. You know what I mean? But yeah, the relationship part of it, for me was like, I was already in, I didn't have a choice of whether I was in, well, I suppose I did, but I was already married, you know what I mean? I've been married for 12 years of my addiction. She'd managed to stick around, and it was like, we both had to decide that we wanted to give this a go. We knew that we you know what I mean, we were at rock bottom as far as our relationship was concerned. And it took a lot of time to build that trust back up again in the first place before we could even start working on our relationship. But we still go on date nights. Date nights in the beginning of our recovery was so I could sit down and listen to what she had to say about my behaviour and how it was affecting her, and her listening to what I had to say without us going, yes, but what about you know what I mean? That being able to hear somebody. I never heard anybody before, you know what I mean? I always had an answer straight away for whatever they had to say. And it was like being able to, having that ability, and it was hard work, you know what I mean? To sit and listen to what somebody else was telling me about how my behaviours were affecting them and how it hurt them. Hard work, you know what I mean? But well worth it. Well worth.
One of my spiritual teachers wrote a list of 10 rules for a happy and healthy relationship, and some of these rules are just like so gnarly. One of them's be supportive. That's kind of hard in itself. But then there's this one rule, and it's apologize, even if they are more wrong, and that's just like, oh shit! Like what? So if they've done something that's more wrong than I've done, I should apologize for what I've done anyway. Try do it. I mean, that's something that I've tried doing, even when just in my friendships and stuff. And man, that it's like there's a fucking nuclear bomb inside you, and you've got to like, it just wants to go off, and that sends your ego nuts. But what I found amazing for that, I mean, it's either go nuts and get angry, or don't get angry. And I think what I have to do is try and understand and see the full picture. It's kind of like, if I just suppress it, yeah, it's gonna come out eventually. But then I like apply the process of trying to understand why they're acting like that, why I feel like this. Am I feeling like that? Is it justified, or is it just my ego having a go, and is it just nonsense from me trying to make myself seem better because I'm insecure? And I found that through not reacting and apologizing and forgiving, because then you've got the forgiveness bit to do as well, because that's the hard part, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the outcome of these events has just been profound and like amazing, and I'm getting better at it. If I'm not tired, then forget it. But if I'm not tired, and I can, and I'm in it's.
Yeah, I love it when this sort of these sort of things happen. You know what I mean? And in the same sort of thing about what sort of comes up for me when I'm in these situations, and I can totally relate to it, is that I heard someone say once, is it better to be right or to be happy? And it was like, yeah, right. It's his, you know what I mean? I can sit there, you know what I mean? I've done it loads of times where I've walked around the house and thought to myself, why am I white? Why there's a little bin in the toilet, where he puts bits and bobs and that, and it was like, and it'd be overflowing, and I'd be saying like, you know what I mean? Why ain't she emptied that? I'd have walked past it 3 or 4 times, and then suddenly, you know what I mean? The penny would drop, and it was like, well, why don't you empty it? You know what I mean? It was like, well, that ain't, you know what I mean? It was my, that build up, you know what I mean? Of like, well, it ain't my job. You know what I mean? That's her job. And it was like, you know what I mean? I really struggled with that because I've been brought up, you know, those imprints that we bring from our parents, where my mum did everything for my dad. My dad went out to work, he earned the money, brought it back. That was it. That was his part done. You know what I mean? And my mum was the one that clean the house up and keep everything spotless and make sure there was food on the table. And you know what I mean? And breaking out of that bloody, you know what I mean? It's so wrong, you know what I mean? And yet I thought it was so right to be that way. You know what I mean? She needed to be like my mum, you know what I mean? It was like, no. You know what I mean? I need to take responsibility for my part in things, you know? My happiness, my joy. You know what I mean? And also, you know what I mean, my partners as well. I'm not interested in what so much these days, you know, with being right. It's more about, you know what I mean, I see it, you know what I mean, in this relationship, I look at it as making amends. You know what I mean? When I can do that, you know what I mean, I can forgive it. There's things that wind me up and I don't let them wind me up, and I realise, you know what I mean, if I have a reaction to something, it's my problem, not hers. You know what I mean? It's the way I'm reacting to whatever she said or done. And I need to find out what's inside me that makes me, you know, feel that way. And when I start bringing it back to me every time, it makes life a lot easier. You know what I mean? I'm not pointing the finger at her all the time. I'm having a look at what now I need to do.
It brings about such it brings about peace, and it does bring about serenity, doesn't it? You know, in the long run, doing this, and it is courageous work.
Yeah.
But if you want a peaceful life, you do have to do this work, don't you? Because otherwise, it's just drama, and the drama never ends.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know. It depends how much energy you've got, but I got tired of it. You know, I got completely worn out. I just couldn't deal with it anymore because I just wondered why all this drama always followed me around. And yeah, I was just making bad choices, reacting to things. And one of the things I realized is if I am simply reacting to what's around me, the external things around me control my entire life. I don't have freedom. I don't get to choose. If something annoys me and I react, and then I react, and then I react, my life is a series of reactions. It's not me choosing anything.
Yeah.
And that was something I realized. It's like I'm not free unless I can step back from my emotions and then make a choice. And that was powerful for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, that thing of, I think I got, you were saying about getting tired with it all, you know, and I think it was, you know, it sort of, when you said it, it sort of brought it back to me that, you know what I mean, I'd been angry all my life. It felt like I've been in conflict with somebody or something all my life, you know what I mean? And I was tired of it. I didn't want to be in conflict, you know what I mean? I'd realised as time went on in my recovery, 10 years into my recovery, you know what I mean, before I'm starting to realise, you know, that I'm still in conflict, you know, I'm still angry, you know, and I didn't like it, and I didn't want to, and I wanted to change it, and then I found a way how to do that, you know what I mean, and like you say, and then find some serenity in my life. But God, you know what I mean, what a trek, you know what I mean, it's not easy when these things are so instilled in us, you know what I mean, these are like, you know what I mean, this happens and I do this. And it was like, I had to find that space in between that, you know what I mean, this happens and hold on a minute, I'll take a step back, you know what I mean, and learning how to take a step back because it was like my reactions were instantaneous, you know what I mean, there was no thought in between it, you know what I mean, it was just an automatic response to the situation. And I didn't want to be like that anymore. I didn't want to be reactionary all the time. Yeah.
I think it's like, I can't remember what it is, but it's something like a 1/7 of a second that you actually have to catch yourself before you kick off. It's like you really have to be on that one. Is there, why was there any particular part of the process where that actually like really had a really big impact on your behavior and that anger? Was there like which part of a process was it that actually had the biggest impact on that?
Well, on my anger, I don't know I think I'm not sure really. I mean, I know that my anger dissipated after I went into the EFT. But I think when I started to understand a little bit about what was happening within me, you know what I mean? I knew when, you know, that accepting a part of me, you know, that this is how I react, you know what I mean? And accepting that this is how I am. And then finding that space, you know, trying to react to that I don't know, 7th of a second or whatever it is, and not acting out on it, you know, and not acting out on how I felt. When I started to be able to do that, you know what I mean, it gave me more, you know what I mean, I felt more empowered. You know what I mean, that this wasn't, you know what I mean, this wasn't who I was, you know what I mean, that these things could change. And because I never thought they could before, you know what I mean, it's like you were saying about the addiction, when you've been in it that long, you know what I mean, you don't believe that there's a way out, you know what I mean, that this is just one big dark hole that you're never going to get out of, and then you get out of that, you know what I mean, and then you realise, wow, it is possible, and then you get to the next stage and you think, wow, this is possible too, you know what I mean, and it's just that constantly moving forward and not standing still, you know. And I think not giving ourselves a hard time when it goes wrong, you know what I mean, and realising, shit. I'll tell you one of the things I learned in recovery that I found really useful, especially in my relationships, not just in my relationship with my wife, but with my family in general and friends as well. It's like, and when I realise that I've done something wrong, normally, you know what I mean, I would make an excuse for it. Or I'd just ignore it, or you know what I mean, I wouldn't do anything. And now, you know what I mean, when I do something and I know I was out of order, you know what I mean, or I've said something that might be hurtful, I apologise straight away. I say I'm sorry and I admit that I was wrong. And that was part of the 12-step program, and I think it was a really important one for me, you know what I mean, because I would never admit that I was wrong to anyone. You know what I mean? It was like and then I got used to being able to say I was wrong, and I actually enjoy it now. You know what I mean? I don't like making mistakes, don't get me wrong, you know, I don't make them as often as I used to. But I like being honest, because I was dishonest. I never, you know, admitted when I was wrong. I had so many areas of life, as we do, you know what I mean, that we grow up with and get used to being normal parts of our lives, that I had so many areas to change, but I just change a little bit at a time. And sometimes I will make mistakes, and I'll admit, but I can admit it today, and I can say that I'll do my best not to do that again.
Yeah, that's amazing. That was definitely a big part of my process, was saying sorry to people. It's something that came intrinsically. As kind of like I started realizing, like, you got to start apologize for all this stuff. You've been a real prick. You know, a lot of your story with the causing trouble. I was always in trouble. Don't know why. I was just a magnet for it, and you know, I was just a real unbelievably inconsiderate. It felt harmless to me at the time, you know, and I was just so self involved. And I think, you know, another thing you said about, you know, when you do something wrong, and not spending that time beating yourself up about it, allowing your mind to just smash you in with it, like, you know, it's just like beating you up with a baseball bat, you know, and I don't try not to spend too much time in my mind just saying, you know, oh, you're worthless, you're pathetic, can't believe you did that, you know, and just try and take some action upon that, you know, say sorry, make amends, do something to try and make up for it or something like that. And yeah, you know, rather than just suffering internally, you can actually, you know, often resolve something into, you know, like you can turn an enemy into a friendship so easily. like it's amazing, isn't it? And you can't always do that. Obviously, that's not in your control. But I found I don't have any enemies anymore. You know, I used to have quite a lot, and now I've got none, just through that process. And you know, it's again a peaceful process. One other thing that's kind of like I really like to touch upon, because you know, suicide amongst my friends, I've had it's been really, really rampant through my friends. How did you overcome suicidal thoughts?
Well, I did, you know, I mean, I didn't. that was the most. That thing in Bournemouth was the one that sticks in my mind. I'm not saying that suicide never entered my mind after that or before that. I'd imagine it's entered my mind a number of times. And I guess every time I use drugs, I use, you know what I mean, an amount that was so close to, you know what I mean, ODing, and I had OD'd a few times. But I'd never consciously want to use enough to kill myself. I want enough to just oblivion. And but I think that, you know what I mean, I contemplate suicide, but I'd never take it, you know, I never really took it really seriously after that time. I don't know why, you know what I mean. I was full of self-hatred, you know what I mean. I was full of self-loathing, you know. I guess that I was always, you know what I mean. I lived a life. I worked on construction. I'd be working at like 200 foot in the air, you know what I mean, completely off my head, you know what I mean. So I was risking my life every day, and I had no value on my life, but I wasn't. I didn't sort of keep those thoughts of suicide for long periods of time. They come and go, you know what I mean, but they never really, I don't think they did anyway, as far as I can remember. I could, you know, I mean, I can remember, there's a part in my book, you know, where I can remember where I was so low, you know what I mean. I used to have running dogs. I used to go chasing rabbits and things with a lamp at night, and I'd always go on my own, you know, just for a bit of solitude to get away from everything. And I remember being in a field in complete darkness, and I'd switched the lamp off, and I just dropped on my knees, and I was like, I had my head in my hands, and it's like, I just fucking can't do this anymore. I've just had enough, you know what I mean? I'm so out, you know what I mean? I can't possibly go on any longer. This is it. And you know what I mean? And really, I would have been quite happy for the, you know what I mean, the earth just to you know, just to cover me up and that in that moment and take it all away, you know. And but then I got up, you know what I mean, and I went home and acted as we do, act as if nothing's happened, and you know what I mean, and carry on regardless. And so I had these moments, you know what I mean, that came and went, but they never sort of stayed with me really. That one in Bournemouth was something different, you know, was something else. Yeah.
That's you know, I mean, a lot of people are looking to psychedelics as a solution to their problems, and I've seen them go, you know, quite radically in one of two directions. Either they give you an experience that shows you that there's a bit more to life than and reality than what you thought there was, and it can create some sort of deep seeking or desire to know more about what's going on, or it can send you completely nuts. And it's a fine line between those things. Because I've had quite a few friends who've had severe trauma who've used psychedelics, not even strong psychedelics, small amounts, and it's brought on a psychotic episode, or even in some of my friends triggered schizophrenia. And you know, I think that they are something that really need to be people need to be careful with, especially if you're not in a good place and you do have trauma using psychedelics. Because I mean, it sounded like the LSD was a big part of you. Was that the incident with you putting your head under the wheel of the bus? Was that after you'd used the LSD?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was after using LSD. Yeah. And I still used it again after that. You know what I mean? It was like, you know what I mean? It took me to that point, and then you know that definition of insanity. You know, doing the same thing and expecting a different result. You know? I don't know how many times I've done that. You know, but. Yeah, I think maybe that's the case. I use psychedelics quite a lot, But not, you know what I mean, quite often, you know what I mean. And sometimes, you know, I'd be lucky and just have a, you know, have a normal trip, you know what I mean, and see the colours and the flowers and all that sort of stuff. And other times it'd be really dark. And the trouble is when you've had a dark episode, you know what I mean, the chances are, because if you take, you know, what I found is if I took LSD again after that, because I was thinking, I don't want a dark one, I don't want a dark one, I was going to get a dark I was going to get a dark trip. And that usually transpired. So, you know, I started to move away from them because they were just, and you could be right. You know, I never at that time I wouldn't have known, but it could have been the fact that, you know, I had all these unresolved traumas that were impacting on the psychedelic, on these psychedelic drugs. Yeah. Definitely.
I would be incredibly hesitant to recommend them as any kind of solution to trauma, but I don't know. They are doing stuff and they are having good results with them. If maybe in a, you know, if people are thinking that maybe in a controlled condition with a dose given to you by a doctor, which is really small and you're safe. But yeah, I wouldn't be barking up that tree personally. I think that you know, 12-step programs are a safer avenue to explore personally. But so what's amazing is, you know, it's so, I mean, even just hearing your accent, I mean, a lot of my guests are kind of all over the world, and it's so nice to have someone who's got so much experience from somewhere, you know, so local. As I say, I'm from Horncastle. I grew up, born in Sleaford, and I grew up in Horncastle, and you know, very familiar with the area, and I've got a lot of friends who will listen to this who are in the Lincolnshire area, who are still in, you know, active addiction. And I just wonder, where can people find you?
Well, I'm on. I've got a Facebook group. You know, the Real Changes for Life. My website is Real Changes for Life. I think you've got it anyway, but it's www.realchangesforlife.co.uk. If they go on there, there's some resources on there as well. You know, some explanations about EFT, and another thing I do is matrix reimprinting. And the Facebook group is Real Changes for Life again, Facebook group, and there's quite a few resources in there, so they might find something that might be useful to them.
Sure, and we'll put those in the notes on YouTube and on Spotify and stuff. So if people want to find you, Trevor, they can click on there. Also, you've got a book, haven't you? Chasing Dragons and Butterflies. Where can people find that?
It's on Amazon. Yeah, so it's easy enough. If they put that title into Amazon, it'll come up. So it's just on paperback and Kindle. Yeah, but there's the full story in there.
Yeah, and I bet it's amazing.
I've been getting quite a bit of good feedback.
I like the name. So it's a great name. Yeah, and with one last thing, the EFT, it's emotional freedom therapy. It's amazing how the body holds
emotional freedom.
Sorry.
Yeah, emotional freedom technique.
Right.
Yeah,
it's amazing how the body holds trauma. I've always found it amazing that when I'm really stressed and I go for a deep tissue massage, how it floods my body with, and I just feel absolutely out of it. I feel, you know, I almost have to take a day off work the next day because it's just released all this stuff into my body. And the EFT is kind of similar to acupuncture, isn't it? And people kind of think that it's some kind of woo thing, but it's really not, is it? I mean, acupuncture is something, it works, and I mean, I don't know anything about EFT, but I do know that I know a bit about acupuncture and the fact that it really is a thing that really really works. I mean, can you tell us a little bit more about EFT?
Yeah, EFT, emotional freedom technique is tapping on certain points of the body, and it's where the portals to the meridians, because the energy system that the Chinese have used for the last 5,000 years, we're just catching up with it, is called the meridians. So they have like energy that runs through the meridians called qi. And what happens is when we get visions and negative amount traumas and such forth, or even stress and anxiety, it can get those negative feelings can get trapped in the body, in the energy system. And when they do, it doesn't just cause emotional problems such as stress and anxiety and depression, but can lead to addictions. But it also leads to physical problems as well. So, our immune system starts getting shut down, and we're having cortisol flooding into our body. It isn't helping. Our gut bacteria is being affected. And constant stress, being under constant stress, leads to a lot of autoimmune diseases as well. And obviously a lot of stuff. I love reading. I don't know whether you've read any of his work, but Gabor Mate, when the body says no, is like, so spot on, and he's worked with addictions, and he knows that it's around, unresolved emotional issues that lead to a lot of these illnesses. And so keeping our body clear, keeping our energy system clear, and not being in the stress response constantly, and suppressing our immune system, is really important. The ideal thing around that I find with EFT, and I love teaching, I work with people to clear traumas and help them with addictions and so forth. But the main thing is that once you learn it, it's so easy to learn. You can go away and do some tapping, and you can wake up in a bad mood, or if you're in addiction, you can have cravings and so forth, and aches and pains, and you can do some tapping, and you can clear these things in a matter of minutes. So it's a really, and that's the main thing. I teach people how to use it themselves, and how to go home and use it as a tool that they can use for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
My grandchildren, when they come round, my grandchildren come round and they call me Popsy, and they say, Popsy, can we do some tapping? Now, they don't know what tapping is, but they feel it, I tap on them and they feel calmer, and I don't have to say about what's going off, but just tapping on those meridian points will make them feel better. So they don't, they want to do it because they know it makes them feel better, and they don't know anything about EFT. But, I love it, I still use it myself, not most days. In fact, a lot of the time, I forget to use it when I could do, and I've got something going off, or, I don't have so much going off these days, but when I do, I can sometimes forget to do it myself.
It's
but yeah, really easy technique to use.
It's more appealing to me than acupuncture because you don't have to get stabbed so many times. It's a little bit less confronting than acupuncture. I've still never actually breathed it myself personally, even though so many of my friends do it. Thank you so much for coming on today, Trevor. It's been amazing to hear your story. I hope that everybody's incredibly inspired hearing someone local who's been through hell and is so far down the journey, and who is really recovering. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. So if everybody
thanks for inviting me, James. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Please check out Trevor's book and Trevor's website. All the links to those will be in the description. Thank you so much.